Dr. Mukesh Dr. Mukesh Jain is currently a professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. Trained as a molecular biologist, he has worked extensively in the area of plant genomics, biotechnology, and computational biology, and he has published more than 110 articles in international journals of high repute and has more than 10,000 citations. Dr. Jain has made significant contribution in understanding the molecular mechanisms underlying various abiotic stress responses and seed development, and has identified several novel key candidate genes and pathways involved in these agronomic traits. For his scientific contributions, Dr. Jain has been honored with several awards. He is a fellow of National Academy of Sciences, India, Allahabad, and National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, New Delhi. He also has been honored with Tata Innovation Fellowship, National Bioscience Award, Nasi Scopus Young Scientist Award, Innovative Young Biotechnologist Award, Haryana Yuva Vigyan Ratan Award, and several Young Scientist Awards from different national academies. His current research interests include understanding of epigenetic and chromatin level regulation of abiotic stress responses and seed development in crop plants using integrated multiomics and system biology approaches, along with generation of useful resources for the scientific community. So with this introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Mukesh Jain to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Is my slides visible and I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Dhanjal, for giving the introduction, and also thanks to Professor Raghava for inviting me to this health summit. So initially, when he invited me and we talked over the phone, I just thought that I work on plant system and agriculture. I have nothing to do with health. So in fact, I did not reply initially to his email, but later on while discussion, he actually kind of cautioned me that everything is related to health. Actually, whatever agriculture or plant related work we are doing, we are working for the food, and ultimately that leads to the health only. So in my talk, I'll have few introductory slides because this is, I can see from the program that this is only one plant session in this. So I will try to correlate a little bit plant with health and then how it is important. And then followed by the focus of my talk will be more on the resources what have been generated by our group, and highlighting some of their applications, that what biology we have been able to find out using those resources. So basically this slide shows a conceptual framework which links agriculture and health. And now I actually realize, so everything whatever we do in agriculture, so ultimate outcome is the health. So whatever you do, all drug discovery, anything, any kind of treatment you take, so ultimately it depends on how healthy food you are taking. So and even the drugs and everything will work only when we have a good food. So in terms of importance of agriculture for providing the food security, we should have sufficient food so that we can feed this world, and then we should have healthy food, not only just a food, and it should be nutritional also. Then only we can achieve our goal of having a good health. So now how we can achieve these three targets of having sufficient amount of food, healthy food, and good nutrition. So the first and foremost question comes, are we really able to feed this world in the coming time? It's a 9 billion question because we are going to be more than 9 billion actually by 2050, and our demand for food is projected to be increased by 50%. So now the question is that, are we ready to produce that much amount of the food, and that too healthy and nutrition food? So because we have a lot of constraints on agriculture, our population is continuously increasing, our consumption habits are increasing, there are a lot of other constraints. We are changing, we are seeing a lot of climate change, other deforestation, pollution. So in fact, this challenge is even more important for India because of our population. So that is the foremost reason. And of course, we have a lot of people that, which like just a few days back, hunger index have been released and we have been given very low ranking into that. So considering that, of course, it is definitely a very, very big challenge for India to give a bowl full of nutritional food to the whole population of our country so that they can be healthy. So now how that can be achieved? So this can be achieved if we can do an agriculture which is knowledge based. Of course, the traditional agriculture has produced a lot of varieties. Many of them, they are high yielding, and we already have green revolution. But now there is a requirement of another revolution, that we can further make a leap in terms of production of our crops. And there are certain molecular methodologies by which we can achieve, and in the center of that lies the genomics. So here just this figure shows that there are several ways how we can basically make precision agriculture, and all of those ways, they depend on the knowledge. We should have a prior knowledge about our molecular level understanding of our the DNA of the crop plants. And if we know what are the targets to be taken forward for either for breeding or by a biotechnology, so we will be able to achieve this goal. So this is just a cartoon to show that we have a lot of crop diversity. When I say crop diversity, so we mean that there are a lot of varieties available for a single crop. Like for example, we take example of rice. So you might have seen in the market so many different types of rice come. So actually there are more than 1 million varieties of rice exist in world. And even in India, around maybe 1.5 to 2 lakhs varieties are already there in the germplasm. And they have different kinds of characteristics in terms of nutritional content they have, in terms of their properties, like in which kind of soil they can grow. They can grow in with very less water, they can grow in salinity, or they are highly producing, but they are quite very much sensitive to different kinds of climate change scenarios. So that is what I meant by crop diversity. So now we have not been able to use that crop diversity to improve our high yielding varieties, that where we know that a lot of seeds which we eat can be produced, seeds or fruits, whatever you say, depending on the type of the crop what we are talking about. And we can actually generate a lot of improved crops. But how we can do it? We should have the knowledge of some prior characters, genotype, phenotype kind of correlation, that what particular type of the makeup of the genetic material is associated with a particular phenotype in which we are interested. And here lies the importance of the genomics. So if we have that knowledge, if we have those kind of resources available, we can convert this crop diversity into improved crops. So that is the step where probably we need to focus a lot in the coming years so that we can achieve this goal. So now coming a brief introduction of my lab. So I will not go through overall these details. So idea is that we do a lot of functional and translational genomics. So basically most of the research is basic research, but has an applied phase. Why I say it is applied phase, that we generate the kind of information which can be directly utilized by in the applied research. Some of that part we are doing in our lab also, but mostly it is like we generate some information. Some of that can be picked up directly by the molecular breeders or biotechnologists who work in a high throughput manner. So, and they can improve the crops. So basic focus is on rice and chickpea, majorly on two traits: abiotic stress, like kind of drought condition, or there is a lot of saline or a lot of salt in the water. If we can grow our crops under those conditions. And then seed development. We all know that seed is very important aspect. So I will come to that, a very brief introduction of that, why it is important. So we implement a lot of omics technologies, including genomics, transcriptomics, epigenomics, functional genomics. We do interactomics, metabolomics, and some of the molecular genetics approach to generate different kinds of information. Ultimate idea is to assign function to the genes, identify some of the candidate genes which are important for particular traits, specifically the two traits which I have mentioned. What are the regulatory elements? What are the genetic variations associated with those? So which can be taken forward. Like this is something similar to the we know that a lot of genetic variations which are important for different kinds of diseases in human. And same thing in agriculture, in plants also, there are a lot of genetic variations. Even a single base change sometimes have been associated with some of the important agronomic traits which are directly related to the yield. So basically, this is the picture which I have taken from ISB, and this is how our research, the research in my lab, basically follows this cycle. We basically, from the already existing knowledge, we create some, we think of some new biological questions, and then using some of the already existing technology, and depending on the requirement that if it is fulfilling our purpose or not, we generally come up with some new technology or methods also. Using those or new or existing technologies, we generate data and then do a lot of computation, and we generate new hypotheses which bring some new insights into the biology. And then again, some more questions arises, and this cycle keeps on. Now, some of the byproducts of these are, as you can see, are the new softwares, development of some of the tools for specific data analysis, of course, new data sets, and some of the new methods. So I consider these as a byproduct for my research, reason being major focus of our research is not the method development or technology development. It is majorly working on specific biological questions. But when we do these kind of work, we come across a lot of questions in terms of technology or tools which are not available and which are requirement to answer our biological questions. So then we generate those kind of biological resources. And thanks to Professor Raghava for arranging this kind of workshop, that I could realize and I could compile my all those data set related to these aspects, which as of now I was not that much very particular, and I did not compile till now, but for this specific workshop I could compile that. So now I will be telling a little bit about those resources or methods, whatever we have developed. So this is just an overview of the different directions of the research, and specifically related to the rice and chickpea, and we have been able to generate a lot of information, mechanistic insights in terms of the data, candidate genes, molecular signatures, and not only rice and chickpea, which have been the major focus, a lot of other medicinal plants also. As you can see in the lower panel, like Plantago, what we call as isabgol, Catharanthus, Seabuckthorn, saffron, Tinospora, Bacopa, mulberry, and Portracia. 2 or 3 plants of these are we are still working on. We have not published any paper, but most of these we have published some of the papers either in form of some type of genomic resources. So first of all, I will talk about one of the tool what we developed recently that is related to the LNC RNA. So we all know that long non-coding RNAs so far, because we were talking about the protein coding genes, and there are only 2 to 3% of the genome which codes for the coding gene. But with the ENCODE project now, we know that almost 90% of the human genome is transcribed, but we still do not know the function of these. So a major contribution which have been found is because of the regulatory RNAs. One of that class is the long non-coding RNAs. And so they have most of their properties which are similar to the protein coding genes. And that is the problem for their prediction, for implementing computational approaches to identify those. Like they are more than 200 nucleotide long, they can have a poly A tail or may not have, but many of them, they have a poly A tail and can be located anywhere, either in the nucleus or the cytoplasm, can be transcribed in any of the direction, perform different kinds of functions as like protein coding genes. I don't want to go into the detail. Another major aspect which makes their prediction difficult is they lack conservation. Like a lot of protein coding genes, or a major fraction of protein coding genes, they are conserved across at least closely related organisms. But LNC RNAs, they are mostly non-conserved. So that makes another, it's further difficult to identify those. A lot of research have been done in animals, and many tools were actually designed for prediction of LNC RNA in animals. But when we started working on these molecules in plants, we could not find any single tool. Even those tools which were existing, they were not validated that how they will work in the plant system. So this is again just an overview of what different kinds of functions LNC RNAs they perform, just to highlight their importance, that they can act as enhancer RNA, they can make complexes with the chromatin, regulate transcription factor activity, they can regulate the conformation of 3D conformation of the chromosomes. So basically chromatin-chromatin interaction. They can regulate messenger RNA stability, pre-mRNA splicing, messenger RNA translation, and they sometimes they have been known to encode small ORF, small peptides, and now they are also coming as the molecules which are important for regulation. And also another one of the like initial role what was discovered for LNC RNA is that they can mimic the targets of the microRNAs. So they can basically compete for the microRNA binding and can actually regulate the function of the protein coding genes. A lot of resources were available, but mostly those were for, again, for the animals, and many tools were also generated at that time for prediction of LNC RNA. Now this list is even more exhaustive. So these are the only few of the tools which have been listed, but most of them or all of them were for animal systems. So we thought of that we should have something that using which we can predict LNC RNAs in plants too. So this was some of the initial work where actually we faced the problem of identification of LNC RNA. So this is our first paper on LNC RNA where we kind of used manual pipeline. So step-by-step filtering of on the basis of certain characteristics to identify LNC RNA, starting from the transcriptome assembly, if they are present in the intergenic region, depending on the length, if they have a ORF or not, or they show some match in conjured protein database, or they have a conjured domain, or they have a coding potential, and also if they lie near to the protein coding genes. So this was a kind of manual pipeline. So, but again, as I told that our kind of energy for development of tools, it all came from our ongoing studies, that what is the requirement, where are the gaps, if we can fulfill those. So considering that requirement, and also of course the interest of the students, if students come up with some great idea, so that is also very much welcome. And this was basically a kind of initiation or by a student, I mean the MTech student who was a student here in SCIS JNU. So this algorithm or this method was developed, PLNC Pro, which is a machine learning based algorithm based on the random forests. So here we had some training data set of mRNA and LNC RNA. We collected some around 81 different features, extracted the features. Based on that, random forest models were built and features were extracted. We studied their ranking, and based on this model, and then we had another test data sets, and using the test data set, we could classify those, either they are LNC RNA or they are protein coding genes. So this paper was published in NAR. So this is some of the statistics which is showing the performance of this PLNC Pro. It is on plant transcriptome database. As you can see, these two bar graphs, they show the Arabidopsis and rice, two gold standard model plants, the ranking of the features, and here in different almost 10 plants we kind of predicted the accuracy of the prediction. And here a comparison of different tools which were available at that time with PLNC Pro has been shown, that you can see for all the plants, the PLNC Pro, it shows a better promise as compared to the other tools. And we tested this on the vertebrate data sets, also human and mouse data sets we downloaded from the different databases. And here also we tested, and we found that this tool performed, the PLNC Pro performed better than the other tools what we used. And another thing what we made is that rather than creating a model individually for each plant, sometimes because in plants a lot of organisms, they have been uncharacterized. We may not have a kind of known set of LNC RNA to create a model. So we thought if we can create a consensus model for monocot or dicot separately, and if that model can be used for prediction of LNC RNA in any unknown species. So we created those models also for monocots and dicots, and then we tested different data sets, and we found very promising result. And we and even we compared these models with some of the published data sets which were based on kind of manual pipelines. Some of those are validated also, and we could find a very good performance of this tool. And we also showed the application of this using our own experimental data set. We had a transcriptome assembly generated from the stress responsive RNAs from rice and chickpea. And here it shows we identified basically LNC RNAs in chickpea and rice, and a lot of those were found to be abiotic stress responsive, and we could validate those via RT-PCR also. The right-hand side panel shows that a correlation between the experimental validation and whatever the prediction we did from the PLNC RNA. So this is basically the initial data set where we showed its application. Then we did some LNC RNA prediction in different traits. So here is the example of the prediction of LNC RNA during flower development. We took the transcriptome data from different stages of flower in chickpea, and we could identify those which are expressed in a very stage-specific manner, as you can see in the heat map in the figure B on the left-hand side. So a lot of LNC RNAs, they were showing stage-specific expression. And another thing we implemented is the network propagation method to do the functional annotation of LNC RNA. As I mentioned, one of the characteristics of LNC RNA is that they do not show conservation. Very few, maybe like if you identify 2,000, 3,000 LNC RNA, maybe 5, 10 or 20, you may find to be conserved. So how to assign function to those LNC RNA because they are not conserved? So we kind of made a network propagation algorithm we used where different data sets were used, and we could assign the gene ontology category. And here is basically kind of validation of that algorithm also, like whatever LNC RNA we identified which are specific to either the early stage of flower development or late stage of flower development. And we find certain geo and categories which are very much relevant to the developmental processes which are happening during those stages of development. So that is how we kind of had some idea that whatever functional annotation we are doing, that is making some sense. And another function which was known for LNC RNA was that they mimic the targets of microRNA. So we made a kind of here we have made a two-way correlation. Then we had a data where we made a three-way correlation also. So here we correlated, we identified that the targets, the LNC RNAs at targets of microRNAs, because we already had the microRNA data for the same samples, and we could find that there are the cases where multiple microRNAs, they are targeting a single LNC RNA, and one microRNA is also targeting multiple LNC RNA. So these kind of correlations or gene regulation we could find, and we could make some biological sense out of it also. But I'm not going into those details. Those, if you are interested, you can read the related papers. I am just trying to highlight the kind of method or tool what we have developed and what downstream little bit analysis we could do. So another toolkit what was developed long back in 2012, this is NGS QC toolkit. In fact, when we developed this toolkit in 2010, only 2 or 3 tools were available, and that through very preliminary analysis we could do for the next generation sequencing data. And like, for example, you can just check the quality and you cannot filter the high quality read. So that was the major kind of push for us, that we should have our own tool so that we can actually, based on whatever parameter we want, we can filter the data set. So we developed this toolkit with different kinds of utilities: quality control, trimming, statistics generation, different kinds of format conversion. So again, requirement based, and this is a very highly cited paper. So till now we have more than 2,100 citations. And even now there are a lot of many, I would say, better tools have also been developed since then. But still somehow we are getting almost 350 citations each year. So one of the reason is that this is very, very user friendly. With those who have a very basic knowledge of Linux, they can also use this toolkit as compared to many other tools which require a little bit kind of expertise to run that. So here is just a glimpse of some of the stats what we can generate, and we had a comparison of different outputs or different kinds of statistics, whatever tools were available at that time. You can see a lot of no's were there for different tools as compared to where we could do a lot of functions using our toolkit, NGS2QC toolkit. This was another web server which was developed long back. This is identification of most suitable reference gene. So we all know whenever we do RT-PCR, either qRT-PCR or semi-quantitative RT-PCR in our experiment to check or to compare the expression level across different tissues, different samples, different organisms, we need to keep an internal control so that we can show that we have started with equal amount of RNA at the start of our experiment, and then there is no technical error also in our experiment. So, but there was a notion that people were using blindly actin, ubiquitin, GAPDH, these kind of
You lose the contact with Dr. Mukesh? Yes, he's here. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of was telling about the tool that are related to the reference gene prediction. So in RT-PCR, we select the most suitable kind of gene whose expression is uniform throughout the samples what we are using, so that we can compare the expression of genes of our interest. And these regular genes, actin, ubiquitin, they were not making much sense according to the biological context. So initially we tested 10 or 12 genes for in different tissues. That was all experimental, and then we found that even actin and ubiquitin, they were not making much sense. So then here we developed a kind of web server based on the microarray data sets which were available publicly. So here we used more than 10,000 data sets from 10 different plant species. So using that expression data, we could find out that if the genes which are most suitable, or they are most uniformly expressed across different biological context. So we define different biological contexts also, so the user can select that what biological context they want to see, or they want to identify reference gene, which plant species they want to identify. So all those options are there. So I'm not going into these details, but this is a very good utility to identify the most suitable candidate genes. This is another web resource. So this is about the tools or methods what we developed. Now I have major kind of update in the form of the databases or other web resources what we have been able to generate. So when we started working on chickpea around 10 years back, so almost nil information was available. So we first generated its transcriptome data using the assembly of the short reads generated from the Illumina platform. And then we thought that we should make it publicly. So we generated chickpea transcriptome database with different kinds of information making available related to the gene space of the chickpea. And it is again highly used database. We although this work was done at NIPGR, and still this some of the utilities although are not working, but it is being maintained there. And later on we updated this database also via integrating lot of other data sets, including the updated transcriptome data set, and more data set related to the gene expression became available. So that also we integrated, and we had a very good relational database, and there are many papers who are using it, and we have a lot of citations for this database also. Then we made use of this transcriptome data to generate another resource in the form of a microarray design, because as I told that not many studies in chickpea were available. And when we started working on NGS, not many people were aware about that, and they did not have expertise. But microarray was quite like very common, and many companies were also providing services for doing microarray experiments. So using that transcriptome data, we could generate an array, and we commercialized it also through the company Genotypic Technology. Simultaneously to the chickpea transcriptome, we were working on the chickpea genome sequencing also. So of course, there was a team from NIPGR who was working on that, and we could assemble the chickpea transcriptome and did a lot of analysis, including its annotation, evolutionary analysis, and some related to the gene expression, and also identification of the genetic variations. But at that time, it was restricted to only 2 or 3 different genotypes. So I do not know what has happened to the right panel. It looks some language I also am not able to recognize. I can assure you it was in English, but I do not know how did it convert. So recently we have generated this chickpea gene expression atlas, very comprehensive database. So basically data from the 100 RNA-seq samples, which represent different developmental stages of chickpea. You can say starting from the germination till the seed, dry seed. So we have all different kinds of transcripts represented in it. So basically this where the font has changed. So this was basically strategy that how we generated full-length transcript using a hybrid method, using the PacBio platform, which generates the full-length transcripts, and also using the Illumina platform, which gives a high depth or a very important information about the gene expression, where we can even check the expression of lowly expressed genes. And we have lot of data sets or output which have been integrated here in terms of full-length transcriptome, gene expression atlas. We have co-expression network, tissue specificity, gene regulatory network, like what are the cis regulatory elements, and what they are the targets of which transcription factor. So we have been make a correlation between that. And finally, that what are the superior trait specific genes. So this is a glimpse of that database. This work is still unpublished, and very soon it will be out. So another trait-based analysis we have done is related to the seed size. That, as I just mentioned, that there are a lot of genotypes with different kinds of phenotypic characteristics. This is one of the character I am talking here, that the seed size varies, and you can easily understand why it is important. When we all go to the market, we look for the larger size chickpea, and you pay more price for the chickpea which is larger in size. So so basically it is economically important also that when the chickpea seed size will be more, so you can expect higher yield also. For the farmers also, it is quite important that we can increase the yield, and further it is more nutritious, and in terms of economy also, like the farmers can get a better price in terms of for the same, if you compare a small seeded chickpea and larger seeded chickpea. So here also we generated a lot of transcriptome data from different stages of seed development, and did a lot of analysis as shown in the flow diagram. And again, this data sets, all these data sets are available publicly. And this is just a model that in terms of application, using all these data sets, what kind of information we have been able to generate. In fact, we have been able to kind of propose a mechanism why the seed size is higher in one of the variety and it is lesser in other, or what are the molecular signatures which determines the seed size. So here what we found is, one is related to the cell cycle, that we have extended period of cell divisions in a larger seeded variety. So the cell number increases. Now, another reason is that at the maturation level, there is a higher level of endoreduplication. We all know endoreduplication, that when DNA content increases, but cell does not multiply. So the cell increases. And when the size of the cell increases, so a lot of storage nutrients, they get accumulated inside the cells. So that is how the number of cells are more number of cells are produced during early stages of development, and then at the later stages of development, the cell size increases due to the endoreduplication and more filling of the storage nutrients occur. So those are the major regions what we found, and in fact we could identify exact some of the target genes, and later on we correlated these data sets with some of the genetic variations. So we have been able to identify some specific alleles and candidate genes, which we are further working on using transgenic approaches, and in collaboration related to the breeding aspects, that people are using that data and they are trying to kind of cross between the varieties based on the knowledge that we have some candidate genes. Those are to be progressed in some other varieties. So this is some of the basic research we could do, that I was mentioning the gene regulatory network, how the different transcription factors, they have the capability to bind to their target cis regulatory elements, and what kind of the genes which are by those transcription factors via binding to their cis regulatory elements. So this was the data what I was mentioning, that we could correlate all these transcriptome data set to several QTLs and genetic variations, and have been able to identify some of the candidate genes. So this is just the location of the different genes has been shown on different chromosomes and QTL, and the lower heat maps, they show the expression profile in those two critical stages of seed development, and a comparative account between small seeded variety and a large seeded variety. So using the same data set, again, we could use our own tool PLNC Pro to identify the LNC RNAs. And again, we found that a lot of LNC RNAs, they show a stage specific expression and are involved in a lot of different kinds of functions. Again, those functions you can see are those that which we found that they are associated with the seed size determination. Like here you can see a lot of terms on the right hand side of the lower heat map that which are associated with cell cycle and also the seed development and seed maturation processes. So this is the three-way correlation here we could make, because we had the similar data for microRNAs also during for the seed size, and we made a correlation between microRNA, messenger RNA, and LNC RNA, that we could find that there are certain LNC RNAs, they can mimic as the targets of the messenger RNA. So whenever LNC RNA is expressed, basically a lot of microRNA, they use LNC RNA as a target. So LNC RNA can act as a sponge of the microRNA, and then messenger RNA becomes free. So it is not cleaved, and you can have more protein available, and which can do its function, specifically related here in this, we are talking about the seed size and so we have now even further narrowed down the target genes, what we could identify only based on the transcriptome data. But here we are integrating the three data sets, microRNA and messenger RNA and LNC RNAs. So this was related to the transcriptome data set, and then we had generated some databases. This is chickpea microsatellite database. Again, when we started, there were only 200 SSRs available for chickpea. And legumes, it is very well known that they have very low genetic diversity. So you need a lot of such information to molecular breeding approaches. So you need to know that the regions of diversity, so where the genetic variations are present within the DNA. So then only you can implement those molecular breeding programs. So this was one of the first database for chickpea that where we could basically categorize and make it accessible and also associate it with the gene expression. So almost 7,000, more than 7,000 SSRs we could put here in this database. This is another web resource in terms of SNP discovery. As I mentioned just now, we did resequencing of around 30 most important chickpea varieties. Most important in the sense they are being used in most of the breeding programs. So we did sequencing at a very high depth, identified their genetic variations, and then did a lot of analysis again to correlate all these data sets with the LNC RNAs, microRNAs, gene expression. So basically, we now one by one we are putting multiple layers of the data sets to further narrow down the candidate genes, and also to identify the most promising target region in the genome which can be used for the breeding program. So here there is an example of one of these study at the back end was related to the seed size, and then we have kind of identified some of the candidate genes where these genetic variations are present within the coding region also, and we could find did some bioinformatics analysis, although this has still to be demonstrated by experimentally, that those genetic variations they affect the stability of the protein, and the protein is susceptible to the mutation. So basically the change in the structure of the protein happens. I'm not a structural biologist, so this we have done basically with the help of some of the friends, and and this is a kind of initial analysis, but we are trying to look at further, both in terms of more comprehensive computational analysis as well as validation it via some experimental method. To basically the idea here is we already have some superior alleles and candidate genes, and if we can give more mechanistic insight in molecular level. So the similar web source for rice also. So here this work done for drought. Another database related to the stress responsive transcription factors in rice. All these databases are published and they are publicly available. Now, we have recently sequenced the genome of a wild halophyte rice, Oryza coarctata. This is a wild rice, but it remains submerged in the sea water for almost 15 days, and still it is happy and able to do proper vegetative growth and reproductive growth, produce seed. It is not edible, but the tolerance level that it can tolerate up to 400 millimolar of salt concentration, the sea water, and also submerge it for 15 days when there is a high tide, so that the plants remain submerged and still they are alive. So the idea behind sequencing of these was what are the molecular factors, what are the maybe specific genes present in the genome of wild rice that which can be utilized for doing these kind of engineering in the cultivated rice, if we can identify those molecular targets. This is another genome project. It is still unpublished mulberry genome project. So we have Indian mulberry, which is very important basically for sericulture and also a lot of medicinal purpose. We are using it. Recently, we have generated the assembly. So this is again at the publication stage. So this database is also available online. Another database which have been developed in collaboration with Dr. Rohini Garg. So this is related to the secondary structure in the nucleic acid. So G quadruplex are very important kind of secondary structures of the DNA and also in the RNA, which regulate the expression of the genes. Not only expression of the genes, there are many components. So I'm not working primarily on this, but I was involved mainly in generation of this database, and for several plants using their genome sequences, we have been able to predict, able to correlate the presence of this structure with the gene expression. And also we could identify some of the structures which are basically conjured across species also. And then they are supposed to make more sense. A lot of experimental validation for those structures are being done related to different kinds of their role in different traits. Now, this is a medicinal plant. Saffron, we all know that's the most prized spice, which is mainly grown in Jammu and Kashmir. And so almost 1 gram, it costs around a high quality saffron, we pay 400 to 500 rupees. And we did the first transcriptome analysis of this and could basically identify the whole pathway which is involved in the production of the compounds which are important for the medicinal property or the spice property of this particular plant. And here we could pinpoint, using the transcriptome data from different tissues, a particular step of this pathway that which is responsible for the production of the compounds. We are talking about the picrocrocine, safranal, and crocine, which are important for its color and kind of better property of the saffron. That here is basically a flux between zeaxanthin and violoxanthin, that which determines that what will be the quality and what will be the amount of the production of these anthocyanins. So all these data set have been also made public. So we are in the process of now like kind of annotation of the genome of the saffron to have even more insights about this plant at the molecular level. There are some more resources. I'm not going into the details of these. So now a lot of focus is on the epigenetic regulation. So this is some of the initial web resource for the rice methylome we have made. So we are working on a more comprehensive database, not only methylation. So we are putting different epigenetic marks, histone modifications, and also attack-seq, DNA-seq, amino-seq data set where like open and closed chromatin marks also, so that we are working on. And so that's it about the databases and resources. So here I just want to highlight about the raw data sets. So sometimes we forget about the raw data set. We just rely on the databases and some of the process data which is available there in either in the supplement material or associated with some of the databases. But I feel that raw data sets are even more important many times than the analyzed data sets. So we have made a lot of data sets, all these data sets, some of those which I have already provided an idea in different studies. We have made it publicly available. So these can be downloaded. Like here, the example, almost 400 samples data we have from RNA-seq, small RNA, bisulfite sequencing, chip sequencing. In addition to this, we have the whole genome assemblies, raw data of the WGS, and resequencing data, PacBio, Hi-C, and transcriptome assembly data sets. The reason is why this data is important, that you can do a lot of R&D using this. Because if you are using the analyzed data, so you are looking for the tables, you can see gene expression. Just an example. So basically, you cannot do much of the R&D when you have raw data set available. So basically, you can look for new biological questions. Same data set can be looked in a different way, can be analyzed in a different way, even to answer the same biological question also. And also, when it comes to the validation of some of the tools or methods, what you would like to generate or somebody else has generated. So raw data sets are very, very important. So basically, at NCBI, GEO, and SRA, these are two major repositories where you can find different kinds of data. So this is just for benefit of the students, because I have seen many times the student, they just come, sir, iska table available nahi hai, iska ye data set available nahi hai. But I always advise them, why don't you look for the raw data set? And if we can process it ourselves, we can generate the kind of statistics or whatever kind of information we want to generate. And even it is a kind of validation of the published studies also. So with this, I would like to thank you, and the credit goes to a lot of or large number of students. So here only a few names I have given here, which who have contributed substantially to this work. I may have left some of the name mistake. I'm sorry for that, but there are many students and collaborators behind all this work, and funding from DBT, DST, SCRB, and of course a lot of these data and the databases were generated when I was at NIPGR six years back, and of course now at JNU. So with this, I would like to thank you everyone, all the participants, especially the last session, and that too on a holiday, so you are here. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mukesh, for such an informative talk. So now the session is open for questions.